Good afternoon, Ms. Mohan. It's an immense pleasure to have you here at the Atria University. I've been looking at your book that you had released, and I've been doing a little background research just to get an idea about your experience. But for our viewers, I would like to just start off with as to how your experience has been as an author so far and what it is like to talk about English in India.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak to the people at Atria University. And I wanted to say that my journey with publishing itself has been very exciting. I mean, for anybody who's in the writing world, publishing a book is one of the most exciting things in the world. But there's also an element of, when you publish and everybody's heard about it, there's always a down in that you're always worrying about the other end, the commercial end of sales and so on, right? So that brings you down. But you always, at least I tell myself, to always remember that the most important thing that I can do is to worry about the written word. So for me, writing or crafting a beautiful sentence is, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Have I done justice to that? As far as English is concerned, it was my journey through English itself until culminating with the publication of my second book, which is An English Made in India. That journey was also a journey of how I felt about the English language as a child and then as a grown adult, an adult who had traveled not just within India, but as well as outside India, right? So as a child, and I was a product of the 60s, so I was born in 1961, and remember that in 1965, English was not anymore supposed to be the official language. But with all the riots and with all the unhappiness, especially in Tamil Nadu, over Hindi becoming the official language, ultimately things happened and English was made the official language, another official language outside of Hindi, in 1965. So all around me is this aspiration for the English language, right? And I saw it in the love with which my grandfather, a teacher in Dahod, in Gujarat, forever and ever, a principal and so on, the love he had for John Milton, right? He would quote. I also saw the love my father had for writing, for a beautifully written article in the Hindu. So I sort of lived with all that, and all my aunts and uncles and so on. So there was always this love for English over another language, So I was always wanting to learn it, but I didn't know to speak it until I realized I could speak it at the age of 11. And that happened when my father went on deputation to the Tanzanian government in 1972 December, when I was 11 years old, and I was thrown amid foreigners in East Africa, in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I was just thrown among all sorts of expat Indians, foreigners and locals and so on. And I had to sink or swim. I had to speak English. And I knew then that I knew English all along because I'd always read so much in English. I was passionately reading everything that I could get my hands on until that point. Always in English. I was winning spelling bees, but I didn't know how to read the language. So anyway, so I wanted to say that outside of the experience in East Africa made me realize how there were many Englishes and how everybody, especially Indians, from every state spoke the language in a different way. We were in a building where we had Bengalis and Gujaratis and Punjabis, and it was only then that I realized that everybody had a particular tang, I call it, a manner of speaking, and you could only identify where they were from by listening to their English. Even today, when someone speaks one line, typically I know where they are from. All of this, this talent for the written word and so on, and winning some prizes and always being told that I was good at English made me come back to India for college and go towards a degree in English literature. Even though my father, just like all of our fathers, wanted me in the sciences. He got me admission in physics. So anyway, so there was this as I returned home more and during those days in Tanzania, and later when I went to America, over the last 40 years, I've returned to India so many times. And every single time I returned, Indian English would sort of show its face to me. And there was all this, it's a quaint, eccentric, archaic manner of speech, right, that people laugh at, but listen. And what I'm noticing is that the young people of India are taking a tremendous amount of pride in the way they speak. Why should a French man have perfect diction in English? Why should the Chinese man do that? Likewise, why should Indians aspire to have the diction of Shashi Tharoor? So I'm noticing that there's a great pride among the youth of India to speak the way they speak it. For me, that was sort of I recognized that over the years as I returned to India.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Just
Please.
Connect on the last point that you were saying about the Indian, youth, the young crowd actually taking pride in the way of they speak English.
Yes.
Just wanted to connect to that, to a question that the youth today in India, they're so driven by the gizmos and gadgets that is they're very tech enabled, right? And in that sense, it's an observation which I was seeing is that they're somehow, I feel, missing out on the subtleties of the language, right? And that is something which is very important, like communication itself is very important in the field of technology and education as well. So what would be an advice that you would give to the budding youth of India?
Yeah, so I feel like, it is so important to pay attention to the language of commerce. Today, the language of commerce is English, whether we like it or not. And so it's important to learn it well. And I also say, we are told in the world of writing, to learn the rules of writing first and then break the rules. So when people think that all they need to do for communication is just sort of stare at a device and communicate through a device, people never forget how you made them feel. So communication, when you look at someone in the eye and communicate, it's an entirely different experience. So the other thing to remember is, for those who love all these gizmos, every technology gets supplanted. The horse buggy got supplanted by the car. The slide rule got supplanted by your calculator, then your phones and so on. So everything is going to go away. What is going to stick? I think what is going to stick is this basic human communication, interactions, a sort of an act from one human being to another. And I think that is something that people forget. And I think that is why language, you always have to fall back on language.
Makes sense. I mean, so coming to this idea of language being something that's going to stay forever, no matter technology may come and go. In your book, the last chapter, it talks about what about the mother tongue. Right?
No, before that, I did want to actually touch upon one more point, especially for the young people. And that is something that I think is very important for those people who are trying to, in colleges like this, become entrepreneurs and all of these things. I think good language always persuades, and you really need to know that you can make a difference between a sale and a loss when you have good language, right? And that soft skills are some of the most important things in the world. In fact, entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, where I live, are always doing this 1-minute pitch, right? They call them elevator pitches. And to do an elevator pitch effectively, persuasively, you've got to arm yourself with the best possible language. And I think in the olden days with my parents and my grandparents and so on, everybody would refer to what's called the Wren and Martin, the grammar book. And I also remember doing that. And so it's very important to have solid grammar, to have your subject, verb, predicate, everything beautifully. And to in order to be able to sell, you've got to impress with good language. And it takes 1 minute for someone to say, look, his English was not good enough. Right. So in some ways, we have to accept that this is the language of commerce and we've got to be good at it. And the other point is that storytelling in every area. I was listening to my husband's talk right now. I never listen to my husband, right? But I was listening and I was thinking of how he is telling a story many times. It's a very critical skill in every endeavor. To add to something else that I keep telling people is that it's extremely important to read widely and deeply. And as you read widely and deeply, you begin to be able to compare things. You begin to recall that something was a certain way and why this is not as good as that, whatever. You're able to analyze critically. So the more you read, the more nuanced a thinker you become. So I will, do want to come to the point that you were asking about my last chapter, which all came about during my research on English in India. I met this lady called the late Dr. Novanitha Devsen, who is extremely respected in India and abroad. She was a deep believer. She spoke excellent English, wrote wonderful English, and she knew Hebrew. She knew a bunch of languages. She was very adamant that she would only write in Bengali. And it was a matter of defiance against the trends of the time. When she returned to India in the 70s, people wanted her to write in English, but she said, I will only write in Bengali. So I titled that last chapter of my book, What About the Mother Tongue? And so the thing that I want to say to people in the university today who are looking at curriculum, that it's important to go back to our mother tongue while learning English and keeping remembering that English is the language of commerce, to also remember to never give up on the mother tongue and to remember that you will always have customers, even as you're developing technology, you're going to have customers who only speak in the vernacular, right? They don't know English. So always remember that. But the other thing is, Novanitha Devsen wrote a beautiful essay where she said, you can only be global when you are local. And she says that very, very beautifully. I want to also connect it to a point that I observed over and over again at the literature festivals that I attended in India, where I noticed that the English language discussions, discussions around English language books will be filled with people, but in the regional language sections, unless there was Aishwarya Rajnikant or Gulzar, there were very, very few people. So I think India needs to change that. We got swept away by English and our aspiration to get English. But I think now is the time to remember that we are producing some amazing works in the regional languages. An example from Bangalore or Karnataka is Vivek Shanbag's Gachar Gochar, and the latest book, Sakina's Kiss, I believe I have it here. He's getting rave reviews in the New York Times, in the Guardian and all of that. So you're seeing US publishers looking for regional language books from India that have been translated beautifully. So you're seeing a change, and I think Indians in India need to recognize that and give that to the students here, and maybe follow. We all want to follow China and Singapore's model of education, right? They are all very high achievers. We're following that, but we need to do that even in the way Singapore approaches language. There are 4 languages which are official languages in Singapore, and every child entering the system has to take one language. And you'll find many Indians, not just Tamil is one of the official languages of Singapore, right? And you'll find many Indians, they could be Punjabi, Marathi, whatever, actually doing Tamil over the entire thing, because it is compulsory. And that's the sort of thing which we need to enforce, and we also need to teach vernacular in a very, very interesting way. Because one of the things that came about when I was writing the book was, all our English books are very attractive to look at, but the books in the vernacular, our second language books, right, not so pretty. So we need to change some of that and make it fun, right? So I will also say that I will end with one point that musician T.M. Krishna recently wrote about 2 days ago, wrote about in the Deccan Herald. There is an obvious English bias. These events, literary events, are for English publications and authors. The regional languages are treated like an extracurricular subject. So I just wanted to say that while English is important, we really need to also think of
Embrace the vernacular.
Embrace the vernacular.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. It was a pleasure talking to you. It's actually pretty interesting that you spoke about Navanita Debsen, because I'm a Bengali myself, and
Wonderful.
when I was growing up, I grew out of Bengal in Delhi,
Right.
so I didn't know how to read Bengali.
Wow.
But my mom used to read Navanita Debsen to me, and
As
she
a
used to talk
Bengali,
about
my
Amartya
God.
Sen and
Oh, yeah.
like all the time, and
Yeah.
that really makes me. I used to think like when I grew up, when I was a child, I didn't think so much into it, but when I grew up, I really felt like I missed out on knowing an entire language, because
Yes.
my house used to be filled with Bengali books, and it was almost like I'm blind because I
So
was.
which vernacular language do you read?
I can read Bengali now.
Now you can.
Now I can read,
That's
but
wonderful.
because I actually took it up because I wanted to read the language and actually delve into it.
Fabulous, fabulous.
But yeah, I mean, definitely it talks about also the point we were talking about, that how if we are talking in the sector of commerce and how language becomes an important aspect there, because at the end of the day we are selling stories, right? We are not
Yes, of
selling this
anything.
product. We are
Right,
actually
right. In every industry.
Exactly,
Yeah.
like humans connect on an emotional level,
Right, right.
and the way to communicate is through language.
Through language.
So yeah, I mean, it was quite an eye-opening discussion.
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you.